Good afternoon. I'm David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States. Thank you for coming to hear about women Vietnam veterans this afternoon. I'm glad you could join us here in the William G. McGowan Theater at the National Archives or joining us through our YouTube station, and a special welcome to our C-SPAN audience. Before we hear from Donna Lowery about women in military service during the Vietnam War, I'd like to tell you about programs we're presenting in this theater today and tomorrow. This morning we opened our new exhibit, Remembering Vietnam, and we're celebrating that opening with a full slate of public events. When you entered the building, you must have seen the 3 Bell helicopters parked outside. At 4:30 today, we'll have a chance to learn more about the aircraft from members of the North Carolina Vietnam Helicopter Pilots Association, who will share their memories of their Vietnam experiences. And tomorrow, November 11th, we'll present 3 more programs related to the exhibit. At 11 o'clock, Frances O'Rourke Dowell will help us see Vietnam through the eyes of a child as she discusses her book, Shooting the Moon. At 2 o'clock, we'll show the film We Were Soldiers, and at 7 p.m., we'll celebrate the 35th anniversary of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial with a panel discussion that will include the founder of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund, Jan Scruggs. To learn more about these and all of our public programs and exhibits, consult our monthly calendar of events online at archives.gov or check our website and sign up for our email updates. You'll also find information about other National Archives programs and activities. Another way to get more involved with the National Archives is to become a member of the National Archives Foundation. The foundation supports all of our education and outreach activities, and there are applications for membership in the lobby. And a little known secret, which I keep telling everyone about, no one has ever been turned down for membership in the National Archives Foundation. As I mentioned earlier, today's program is one of a series of events we're presenting in conjunction with our new exhibit, Remembering Vietnam, which just opened in the Lawrence F. O'Brien Gallery upstairs. The exhibit is a media-rich exploration of the Vietnam War, featuring interviews with American and Vietnamese veterans, civilians, and firsthand experiences of the war's events, as well as historic analysis. It's a fascinating collection of newly discovered and iconic documents, images, film footage, and artifacts that illuminate 12 critical episodes in the war that divided peoples of both the United States and Vietnam. Remembering Vietnam draws on National Archives records from all parts of our agency, federal and civilian military records, presidential libraries, still photography and motion pictures, sound recordings, and electronic records. I encourage you to take a walk through the exhibit, if not today, then come back anytime in the coming year. Now I ask all Vietnam veterans and any United States veterans who served during the Vietnam era, November 1st, 1955 to May 15th, 1975, to stand and be recognized. Thank you for your service and welcome home. As you exit the McGowan Theater today, veterans, National Archives staff and volunteers will present each of you with the Vietnam Veteran lapel pin. On the back of the pin is embossed, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you." The United States of America Vietnam War Commemoration is a national initiative, and the lapel pin is the nation's lasting memento of thanks. Today we've come to hear about a very particular group of Vietnam veterans, the estimated 1,000 women from the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, and Air Force who served as intelligence analysts, flight controllers, clerk-typists, translators, physical therapists, dietitians, communication specialists, and even some nurses, and much more. In her book, Women Vietnam Veterans, Sergeant Donna Lowery, Sergeant Major Donna Lowery, tells their overlooked story. In her 26 years of service, Sergeant Major Lowery was first sergeant of 4 units and served 4 overseas tours. In 1967, she was selected as one of the initial group of Army enlisted women to serve in Vietnam. After her retirement from the Army, she worked for the Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs. Since her retirement, she's been active in her community and received one of the governor's 50 volunteer awards for her work with the homeless in 2010, and also received the Washington State Outstanding Woman Veteran Award for 2011. Please welcome Sergeant Major Donna Lowery.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am so excited about being here because I'm going to tell you about a fantastic group of women that in this country have been overlooked until this time. Now, when I speak of the Vietnam War, then I'm talking to you at a time in our country where women were segregated. So for the Army, we had the Army Nurse Corps and the Women's Army Corps. For the Air Force, we had the Women's Air Force. The Navy, we had the Navy women, and the Marines, we had the Marine women. Each of our groups was led by a 06, which would be a colonel in the Army. Whoever was the director, and there was only one director for each of the Women's Corps, that's the woman who made the decisions for those of us that served under them. For example, later on, we were in this mint green uniform with a beret, and General Bailey had gone shopping at Saks Fifth Avenue. I asked her myself about this awful uniform, and she told me that she had gone to Saks Fifth Avenue. She thought this mint outfit was just as cute as could be, and that became the Army uniform for a period of time. General Bailey was also shopping at another time at Saks Fifth Avenue again, and I asked her where we got our drill sergeant hats, because I'm a drill sergeant, and she said to me, well, First Sergeant, I was the first sergeant of Fort Carson WAC Detachment at the time, and she came to visit, and she said, you know, this is a fascinating display, and so I saw this. It looks like a safari hat, and so it is a wide brim. It comes with a mosquito netting. You can just imagine yourself out with the elephants and others, and that's how we got our drill sergeant hat. So each of the services, we had one woman, and that's the woman that made the decision for each of us under there. Now later, and that would be a colonel, and later we were permitted to have one woman general in charge of each of our women corps. So the women that I'm going to talk to you about today, these women are not nurses. I tell you, as a retired sergeant major, I have had, and from the time that I left Vietnam as a staff sergeant to the time I retired as a sergeant major, I must have had at least 1,000 people come up to me, whatever my rank was, and say, Sergeant Major, so you were a nurse in Vietnam. I didn't know that. The nurses did an incredible job. We're really, really proud of them. But this is the group of approximately 1,000 women that have never received any recognition, and that is my purpose here today. So Phyllis K. Miller is a master sergeant. She lives in North Carolina. She is, in fact, one of my very closest friends, and she has put together every PowerPoint presentation I've given, which has been a lot because I'm always changing what I want to say. So this is the front and back of our book. Now, we had 20 women, and we have 2 of the book team members here today. We had 20 women from around the country. Some of them put in excessive hours. We were working 60 to 70 hours, and we were working for 2.5 years to get this book published. So I paid extra for the design of the cover because I wanted a really nice one that would stand out, and you can see that the women were in Class B uniforms. And that is because we went to Vietnam in our Class B, so that's a skirt, the top, that you see that, with our heels, with our nylons, with our puffy hair. And that was our uniform until after we moved to Long Bin, and then we changed into the fatigues. So you can see I could only put 10 women on the back that I wanted to recognize, but truthfully, I wish I had more room to recognize all 20 of them, because without them, there would be no book. The number of women that served in Vietnam, we don't know. Honestly, we don't know. It's a disgrace for this country that we do not know that. I put in a Freedom of Information Act request after the book came out, and I asked, can you give me the number 1234? Now, this is the number that we've been hearing since 1997, since a group of women got together and they were at the Vietnam Wall, and then they started the Vietnam Women's Vet, an organization that we are part of. And so what happened to them was that they said, okay, there's approximately 1,234, or, gee, we really don't know. Oh, but we really do know. And now the figure is 1,234. And so we went on that for years. And I can't tell you how disappointing it is to the women to know that they served and did a tremendous job, but that they were not recognized. And so when I talked to the Freedom of Information, they said to me, okay, here's what we can do for you. We can eliminate the nurses from our database for you. And then we can tell you everybody that was in all of the services, but we can't give you any names. And I said, well, that's useless. What am I going to do with this piece of information? Then they sent back, and they said, here's the truth. We don't know who of you served over in Vietnam. That's the truth. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay that people don't know, those of us that served in Vietnam. I'm not okay if people go around the world telling people like they know something, and they really don't. And so now, and I'm going to tell you in a few minutes about my new hero, person who told us the truth. So I formed a team by knowing that the WAC Detachment had the greatest number of women, and I started with having the women commanders, but most of our women commanders are deceased. And we only have one first sergeant that's alive, and that is Marion Crawford. So, and Peggy Reddy, who was my first commander, she was ill, and so she couldn't take part. So Marion Crawford took her part. Pat Jernigan, that we have, and I'll introduce you to her in a little while, she took several roles because the commanders were deceased, and we needed somebody who would take over that. So we started, and we built a team of 20 incredible women that were really committed to having this history. Here are the numbers. We found 863. There's probably more than 1,000, but we don't know. We have our database administrator here today, and her name is Marcia Cricket Holder. She is from Mississippi, and she is the one that is taking care of our women. I was really concerned about what were we going to do with the deceased. What was going to happen when we would go and we didn't know who died or when they died, and they got no recognition for their service whatsoever. And Cricket has taken on that task. It is her calling. And honestly, she'll be working on taking care of us until the very last, when I can just see her at the grave telling somebody, oh, write this down. This is my death. This is very important here. We want to make sure we have our database right. So she has found 288 of our women. We have 403 stories. So we have stories like Pat Jernigan, who is here. She worked with the family of Major Doring, who was the first woman that went to Vietnam. And we have other family members that we've worked with. We've written stories for our friends, you know, all kinds of whatever connection we could make so that we could recognize as many of these women as possible. So we have 460 images. So, you know, they're old black and whites, they're grainy, but we have 460 of them. In the chapter that the 4 through 12 are the chapters that list the women individually, and it starts from the beginning when Major Doring was there in 1962 to when the last women left, which was in 1973. So I want to read you from my new hero. This is Colonel Mark Franklin, Chief, History and Legacy Branch, United States Army American War Commemoration. And he said, when I first came on board with the commemoration in 2011, one of the first things my team tried to do was determine an accurate number of women who served in Vietnam, both nurses and non-medical, because I wanted to do a poster series on both. For non-medical women veterans, we were able to get a pretty solid data from each of the services except for the Army. And that is pretty sad to have that told to you when we have the largest group over there. They were a challenge, according to Colonel Franklin. And after some pretty extensive research, we were able to find accurate data that could provide something more than round estimates or guesses for Army women veterans that served in Vietnam. Our poster on non-medical women who served in Vietnam states approximately 700 WAC. But again, this is a very rough estimate because by their own admission, the United States Army did not keep good records of Vietnam veteran women. If someone has that information and is willing to share it with us, I would be most grateful, but I just don't think that it is out there. And that's what I got from him earlier this week. So the Marines, we have 35. We know that there are 35 of them. I've gone to Quantico. Mary Gladell de Zurich, who is our Marine representative, did an excellent job. I've given her permission so that she and the Quantico people can do a book on the women Marines by themselves. I'm hoping that that happens. The Navy identified 8 women. We found 4 other women, thanks to Penny Adams, who was on the, I'm not sure if she was on the Repose or the Sanctuary, but she was on one of those 2 ships, and they were hospital ships that were off of Da Nang. So we count 12 now instead of the 8. We have approximately 200 Air Force women. We don't have a good count on them at all. And we're working on it. But you can see from the numbers that always that the Army has the greatest majority over there. So this is me, and this is to show you our uniform that we wore. And I said, can you guys find somebody who's got this big puffy hairstyle, find out who's got the worst one, and let's put it up. And they said, that would be you, Donna. So here we have our colonel who felt that this was really appropriate. We be dressed like this in a war zone. And the next photo you're really going to like. This is our beautician. We had a beautician in the compound, Pierre, so he could always keep our hair nice and fluffed like this. So they put in the compound a permanent trailer. So we could go to the beautician and have a manicure or pedicure at any time. Very important, I'm sure. To who, I don't know. So this is the start. The start was our first WAC, Major Doring, in 1962. She served by herself. In 1965, about the same time, General Westmoreland was interested in advisors to the Women's Armed Forces Corps, they were Vietnamese, and in having stenographers over. So what happened was that the military stenographers came over to Vietnam for the first time in '65, and they went to stay at hotels. They never became part of the WAC Detachment. And there were a number of hotels that the women were billeted because later we would have different specialties and different services that would come. So for the advisors to the Women's Armed Forces Corps, what happened was that the president of South Vietnam, why do I have South Korea on my mind? But of South Vietnam, that he decided he was going to have a women's armed forces corps made up of exclusively Vietnamese women. And so he said, well, when the president asked General Westmoreland, he said, I'll send you 2 WACs. I will send you a WAC officer, and I'll send you a enlisted woman. And so that was very well accepted. Later, we had the Air Force was sent over, and they had a women's Air Force that were made up of Vietnamese women. I want to read you something because I want to make sure that I get it correct. Colonel Emily Gorman was the director of the Women's Army Corps in November 1964. She received a letter from Brigadier General Ben Sternberg directing the assignment of the women and offered some friendly advice. The WAC officer should be a captain or major, fully knowledgeable in all matters pertaining to the operation of a WAC school and the training conducted therein. She should be extremely intelligent, an extrovert, and beautiful. The WAC sergeant should have somewhat the same qualities, and she should be able to type as well. Colonel Gorman replied to the general, they would certainly try, quote unquote, and then added that the combination of brains and beauty is, of course, common in the WAC. So that's where we were at that particular time in our history. Okay, so you can see the Vietnamese women, and they're in their traditional dress. On the left-hand side is Major Wilkes. On the right-hand side is Sergeant First Class Adams. You can see that they're in the Class B uniform and that they have heels on. And here they were. Can you imagine 1965 is when our women started, and this is from 1971. And it was really a tremendous time for a connection with our country because 51 of those Vietnamese officers went to Fort McClellan, Alabama. 50 of them went to the basic class. And one of them actually went to the basic class and also the advanced officers training. So this is Tent City B. This is where it all began for some of us. And Tent City B, this is the WAC Detachment. So right here we had 10 Quonset huts. So those are those metal ones. This is the hut that me and Donna Deere, my good friend Donna Deere, we were in this one. And a bullet came in it, in Donna's bed. And had she been there, she would have died. She would have been the first casualty. This here is our patio area. So what would happen is you come to the WAC detachment, to the building, which had been a French building before, and you would go, and the men were not permitted in unless we were at a party. If we were at a party, then they could come. Otherwise, they would come and check us out. And, you know, just like you would check something else out, they would check us out. And this here, you see a little umbrella thing. Okay, that was big enough so that one couple could sit on it. One male, one female sitting out there, that was the dating area. Now, if you didn't get there quickly, then we had our dating here in the gravel. So we would be one man, one woman, one man, one woman, just sitting there for hours after we got off of work. Then we have the road here. We have 5 rows of tents. Those were engineers. And then we have the perimeter, which was a fence. And this is a Vietnamese golf course. This entire area was destroyed. So we moved in July 1967. In January 1968, at the biggest Tet Offensive, Had we not moved, the entire UCV would have been destroyed. Everything. Now, when we had the monsoon season, I mean, it was just really outrageous. So I walk from out here, the orderly room, walk over here. I'm dry. I get to about this point one day, and I am soaking wet. Here is the monsoon. By the time I get to my office over here, I'm dry again. And that's the way it is. And I'm going to show you a picture of the monsoon. Here's the monsoon. So the reason that I selected this is, one, for up here, okay, good. Yeah. I don't know, maybe I pushed it too hard. Anyway, there, good. So you can see that these are sandbags. And these are sandbags at one of the office buildings, but this is the way that they were, stacked up like this at the WAC Detachment. And so we didn't have bunkers for everybody. So some women would just go behind one of the sandbags and stay there. The other reason I selected this picture is because this is a wig. And I had really long hair in those days. And as long as your hair did not exceed the bottom edge of your collar, you were fine. So I put all my hair under it, had on my wig, and was perfectly fine. This is a bathroom, an outdoor outhouse. And what would happen every day is we would use it, and a Vietnamese man would come over, and he would burn all of the feces. And so if you had an office next to there, like me, it was a terrible place to be. Now this other side, there's another little building, and that's the men's shower. So how this worked is that I would walk around this sidewalk, say hi to whoever was in the shower that morning, and then come down this way and then go to my office over here. And everybody they'd be shaving, they just, I mean, it was just from the waist up, but everybody be used to me because I was the only woman there at the time. And they were just used to, Donna, hi, morning, see you at work, okay. Okay, this is a monsoon, so this is in front of my office. I'm about 5'4". I guess I've shrunk now, so now I'm 5'2". But in Vietnam at 5'4", this would have covered me. It's one of the ditches. So just terrible, the monsoon. This is a poncho that we were given, but none of us were dry. We had awful things where our women that the bunks would go floating down the aisle in the middle of the barracks because the rain was so hard, and it would come through the cheesecloth on the side. We have somebody who was below the second company commander, and what happened to her all of the time was that the rain would go through the company commander's floor right on her head, so she would sleep during the monsoon season with a poncho over her. So relatives, we have something I think really interesting. This is Sue Schlungel. Oh, there it is again. Okay, I don't know why I'm having a problem. Oh, Sue Schlungel, and this is her father. And they were in Vietnam at the same time. And then what happened was when her father went to take her, because he wanted to take her to dinner downtown, then he had to go through a checkout by the second company commander to make sure that he wasn't just flirting with this young woman, that he actually was her father. And we had some women who served with their husband. We had some women that served with their brother, like Donna Deere. We had some who served in place of their brother. And we believe that we have the only set of identical twins that served in Vietnam at the same time. And that would be Charlie and Kathy Call. And I was a drill sergeant with them. But when they were in Nam, it was Major Browning who was in charge of that office. And she said that she could not tell them apart. So she said to Charlie, you go on the left-hand side of this office and stay, and Kathy, you go to the right hand. And I don't want to hear of you guys changing sides to confuse me. So, Tet Offensive of '68, the biggest campaign of the war. The ammo dump, which was about 3 miles away from us, went off for 3 days. 103 nights. So what happened was we had payday formation, and we have Mary Hay Wilson here with us today, and she was really brave because as the ammo went down, she jumped on somebody to save them. And, you know, we, of course, were not used to that and being so close, and it was so bad that the company commander ran away, and she tried to get under her desk, but a Red Cross worker was already there. So she couldn't get under there. I had yellow paint on my room. The paint came off the room. People fell downstairs. I mean, we had a number of injuries that day. And keep in mind that we're having our bouffant hairstyles and whatever, but we were in fatigues at that point, and so we were able to, you know, come and fall on the ground. We weren't supposed to, of course. You know, we have to stay nice and neat, but we did. So there was a difference at the Tet Offensive as to being in the bunker. So if you're at the WAC Detachment, then we had bunkers, but we didn't have bunkers for everybody. So what happened is that we had some people in bunkers, and some people were behind those sandbags that I showed you before. And so that was the only protection. Life at the hotels were really something. We had a number of hotels. And during the Tet Offensive of '68, the Marines were at a hotel where 27 men, MPs, died. And for 3 days, they were there, and they had to stay. And what they did was went up to the kitchen because the Vietnamese was not there. I mean, there was a restaurant in their hotel. And they fixed sandwiches for everybody during that day. Well, the firing was going on, and when they were finally released days later, they were released to buses that had barbed wire, that had men with guns in them to take them to work. It was really a scary, scary time for us. I want to tell you about the defense plan for the women, specifically the WAC Detachment. And I had started the book when I was at the Sergeant's Major Academy in Class 27. Ruth Riggins was there, Donna Deere was there, and Joyce Poole, and I did their interviews while I was there, and we were talking about the defense plan. And I talked to Betty Morden, who was our historian, much like David, but she was for the Women's Army Corps. And she sent me some information. And my question was, what was the defense plan for the WAC Detachment? And she sent me this conversation that had come on with a number of people after they came back from Nam, and they were talking about it. And the defense plan for Mary and me and Cricket was that we were supposed to go in a particular ditch. We were to jump up, and we were to kill Charlie, who was the VC and had an AK-47. So for years I thought, oh, I guess we were supposed to throw our heels at him. I really couldn't think of any other plausible idea. And it was not until a couple of years ago that Mary Stedman Vassis from Oregon said to me, "Don't you remember?" And I said, "No, honestly, I don't." She said, "We were supposed to jump up and use our hairspray on him." So can you imagine being a young woman, no weapons, because it wouldn't look appropriate for Americans back home to see that? That the defense plan would be for you to jump up with no weapon and have your hairspray ready and kill the enemy? That was our defense plan. Should the women get weapons now? Keep in mind that we're segregated, and it's Colonel Hoisington, later General Hoisington, who made the decision for us, and she decided we shouldn't have any. So we didn't have any. I want to tell you about some extraordinary bravery. This is Mary Bender. She was a warrant officer, and she saved women that were in a hotel. So there were a number of hotels. We're talking about Tet of '68. And Mary was down there, and her job was they gave her a couple of grenades, they gave her old weapons, a revolver and an old rifle, and they wanted her to protect the area on one of the stairwells up to the 3rd floor. Mary was there for 3 days. She killed some of the Viet Cong. When she was put in for a Silver Star for her heroism, she was told that she was a woman, and she couldn't get it. Mary Bender touches my heart because she did a very brave thing. She died homeless on the street because when she received a discharge when she was pregnant, she got a dishonorable discharge. And it was through the bravery of her son and some friends that she is now buried in Arlington. We have Karen Offit. She's alive and well and going to be on the radio this week sometime, and we're really happy about that. She lived in a hotel, and she was sick, so she was homesick that day, and she thought there was a fire in the hotel. But there was not a fire in the hotel. It was next door. So you see those pictures where they're hamlets, where they're 3-sided little things, where Coke cans are melted down, and they're just shacks. And so that was her hamlet. It was a little village, which was just a few feet from the hotel. And so what happened is that Karen ran out there and saved that village. There were 80 people. She saved them. And when she was to get the Soldier's Award, they said to her, "We do not give that to a woman." 30 years later, in Florida, Karen Offit got the Soldier's Award, and we're very, very proud of that. Major Kadoria, she actually ended up retiring as a brigadier general. She worked with the MPs when we were first there, and so she was familiar with weapons, and then she became the protocol officer in the north part. So when the generals and other people would come, she would be the one that would be responsible for providing safety. So she had a weapon. And she would be out there with her weapon, leading the convoy or whatever. And her general said that she was so great at this that she scared the very important persons that were coming more than the VC. So I just want to talk to you about a few of the extraordinary women. Honestly, this group is so wonderful. I could talk the entire day about them. But Colonel Pat Payton, she was a pilot with a WASP in World War II. But when it came to Korea and Vietnam, she was not permitted to fly. And so she was in the intelligence area on that. And in her case with that, she did intel about the Ho Chi Minh Trail and how they could target people. That was her job in Vietnam. Dr. Bowen, she's one of my favorites. She was the first black physician to hold a military commission, and she entered the Army in 1955. And it was 1970, and she was still the only black woman physician in the Army. Now, she became the chief psychiatrist in Vietnam. She was the chief psychiatrist at 2 VA hospitals and 2 Army medical centers. And when they asked her, because she was black, did she have difficulty because she was black? She said no. Honestly, people have advanced with that. We're not where we should be, but that's not an issue for me. What is an issue for me is I'm a woman. And they see me as not competent, and I have a real hard time dealing with that on a daily basis. The last person is Marion Crawford. She's our only first sergeant that is living. She just sold her home in Georgia, her dream home, and is moving in the next couple of days to Florida. Well, she'll be staying. And we love her. Mary Hay Wilson, Cricket, and I couldn't list all of the other women. She was our first sergeant. She was our mother. She made a change in my career. Priscilla Landry Wilkowitz says that I came over as a scatterbrain kid I had just turned 21, and I left committed to the Army and served for 26 years. And that's because of Marion Crawford and Betty Benson, who were absolutely extraordinary role models. So I wanted to tell you a little more about that time to give you an idea. So the men did not need this, but the women needed the parental consent to enlist. So we had to have both mother and father. Also, the men did not need this, but if you re-enlisted, us women would need to make sure that we had our mother and father sign the papers. Now, I was able to re-enlist just before I turned 21. And my father's a vet, a World War II vet, and he did not want me to stay in Vietnam. And so he really did not want to sign the papers. But I convinced them that in 2 weeks I was on my own and I could sign at 21, but I would lose that $5,000 re-enlistment bonus at the time. So he grudgingly, signed those papers. So pregnancy, if you got pregnant at that time, you received a dishonorable discharge. Can you imagine that? Our women came back, they took their ID, they didn't say thank you for your service, and they discharged them. Now, something which is really neat is the adoption. So Kathy Oatman was there for many years, and many of our women were involved with the orphanages and, with the kids. And we even had, during my time, they had a party over at the WAC Detachment for the kids. And so Kathy fell in love with a little boy named Kevin. And she actually had him at the WAC Detachment for a month before she left. And she said that everybody wanted to be a mother. And it was like, oh, yes, you need to put this coat on. Oh, no, he's too hot. You need to take this coat off. And so she said there were many, many mothers to Kevin. Then she decided she couldn't just take Kevin home, that just having one child, so she wanted a second child. So she took Kevin and Kimmy home. And then we had in 1971, and this affected Edith and Grendel Howard. And what happened was there was a new adoption policy in the United States Army. And for us to have that policy, there was a loophole. Because up until that time, single women were not to be adopting children. And so Fort Meade, Maryland took a stand, and they were both at Fort Meade. And they had the authority to approve adoptions, and both of those women in their 50s adopted children. It was really a great day for people that wanted to do that. Consequences of war. It was quite a thing, and we have people that are dealing with PTSD. We have people that are not sleeping through the night, that are still crying when they see something, that still 50 years later it is touching them. One of the reasons is that when we came back, there were no services. So I know guys that went to the bush in Chehalis, which is a little town near me in Olympia, Washington, and they stayed there for years. There was no PTSD. There was nothing. People didn't discuss it. They kept it to themselves. And so I am now proud that those young veterans, they say, to everybody, oh, I have PTSD. And I'm like, good for you. Good that you can put it out there, because our generation didn't have the ability to do that. 24th evacuation, that's where all of the women ate except for me. I was a personnel person when I first went there. Everybody else was a clerk-typist. I came from Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, and I was a typist too, but somebody in personnel found out I had gone to personnel school and suggested that I ask for a job over there, and I did, and they gave it to me. And so where our women experienced so much, like they had to eat at the 24th EVAC hospital. And we have Cricket here today, and yesterday she was crying with the pilots because they brought day and night the medevacs, those that were dead, those that they lined up with the boots and the name tags. And we have women that have lost a lot of weight. We have women that lost their hair. We have women that the thought of 24th EVAC is more than they can handle. And it's a sad place. Everybody considers it. So some people just stopped eating. They couldn't go to the 24th. They had to go to the PX and buy, and they didn't even have good protein bars in those days, so candy bars. And that's what they lived on. Now, an evacuation plan. Yes. So the evacuation plan, we were non-combatants. So for those of you that are not military, that's like a family member. So by law, all of the women that served in Vietnam were like family members. They were non-combatants. Nobody was a combatant. So when our unit was determined to have no evacuation plan for us, it was hard, especially on the woman who's been a recluse for 50 years, because she can't believe that her country sent her to a war zone and had no plan for her to leave. Welcome home, Vietnam vet. Well, every Vietnam vet that came back to the States knows how awful it is. Again, I was saved. I became the youngest first sergeant in the Army outside of combat at 21, and I went from Vietnam to Germany. But for the rest of our women, they came back. They were spit on. They were called baby killers, just like the men. They were treated just awful, and in addition, they were called whores. Terrible time for our country, for all of our people. So these are three people that worked on the book. Cricket Holder, who is here today, she was from the beginning. From the beginning, when I wondered about the people that are deceased, she has been there the entire way, from day one to the end. The second person is my friend Phyllis Miller. She is not a Vietnam vet, but she wanted to honor everybody, and truthfully, without her, we would have no books, because I don't have the skills that are necessary to put this book together. We have Claire Brisbois Starnes, and she is a co-founder of the Vietnam Women Vet, the organization that we belong to. And she joined us after the first draft, and she's a photojournalist from Nam. And so she was able to contribute quite a bit. But it's not an exaggeration to say that without these women, we would not have a book. And without Phyllis, no doubt, there would be no book. So I want to tell you about some other books from our women. The first one is 3 Days Past Yesterday, and that is by Lucky Allen. It's about 70 pages. This is really a sad story. Lucky Allen was in the intelligence field, and she saw what she calls the 50,000 Chinese. She foresaw the Tet Offensive of 1968. And Lucky went from her headquarters to Saigon to those headquarters, and she told them that we were going to have a huge offensive. And she says the men didn't believe her, not because she's black, but because she was a woman. And it is so painful for her to look at that wall when she believes that she could have saved some of those lives. if only people had seen her as an intelligence person as opposed to a woman intelligence person. And then we have Linda Earls. Linda's a country girl, and she wrote to her mother all the time. She was in the NOM, and her mother wrote her back, and this is her book. So all the letters she wrote and all the letters that were written back to her are in that book. And the third book, we have Carol Ogg wrote that book, and it's situational stories that she put then into a historical perspective. So it's all three of them written very well, and I suggest that you get those books. They will help you. So today, and I'd like her to stand up, this is Mary Hay Wilson, the person I told you that was our hero during Tet Offensive 68. And she was trying to save Glenda Storney Graby when we had this. So Mary and I were there together, and she worked, and I had this wrong, so I'm going to correct it now. She worked for the United States Army Engineer Command Provisional. And yes. Okay, the second person I'd like to introduce to you is Colonel. Come on, Colonel. Colonel Pat Jernigan. She's a book team member, and she was in the intelligence field in NOM. Okay, and I want to introduce you to Marcia Cricket Holder. And she really is done an extraordinary job. So she's a book team member. She's got a virtual cemetery for all of our women that we have. She's our database administrator. So when we have somebody who's interested in interviewing one of our women, she's the one that has the information on everybody. So I would tell you today that I hope that you will each talk to one person and let that person know the amazing story of these incredible women, because they certainly are. And I did a 2-hour graduate level presentation at the Freedoms Foundation last year. I have a 38-page lesson plan with a 38-page PowerPoint with a 49-page lesson plan. I give it to you. I ask you to take my name off of it, take it apart, do whatever you want, and go and teach it. Give it to the teachers in our country. Share it at organizations. If you need anything, we are there to provide you the best information we can on this group of women. So this is our email, which goes, of course, to Phyllis, because I'm not really good at this, as you can tell. And Phyllis will be the one responding to you, and we'll give you that lesson plan. It will be on the commemoration site as soon as they get some things done on that site. They're going to put it up as a tool to teach people about this group of Vietnam veterans. So I want to thank today. Oh, I want to tell you that I was contacted. Everybody doesn't know this yet, but I was contacted by a producer. And I signed a shopping agreement, and he wants to sell a TV series or a movie on these women. I'm so excited. So if anybody is in that business, just use that email, and we'll refer you to the producer. I want to thank the National Archives. I want to thank Susan Clifton up here, okay, that she set everything up for me. I want to thank David. Thank you very much, our archivist of the United States. You know, what a privilege to be able to have him here today. Patrick Madden, who, of course, is the head of the National Archives. I want to thank, and, oh, I don't have the right paper here. I want to thank my old boss, and he's in the front row. He came from Maryland today to be with us. He was the deputy commanding officer over at USUCOM when I was there in 1982. So he has, oh, this is terrible. I wrote it down somewhere and I left it. And he has, it's really embarrassing, but he has a Hawaiian name. So I had to write it down, phonetically. And now, oh, wait a minute, I got it. Oh, I'm very happy. So his name is Warren Ki'ilehua. So thank you, Colonel. I also want to point out today how happy that I am that Ann Kelsey, would you stand up, Ann? Now, she's a librarian and was a librarian in Vietnam, and she has helped our organization quite a bit. And she even wrote something about one of our women in the book, so it was a pleasure meeting her today. So I want to thank you all for coming. I'm open to questions for the next couple of minutes if anybody wants to come down and ask them. If not, we'll be having a book signing party outside, and then you will have me and Pat Jernigan and Mary Hay Wilson and also Cricket. And so thank you so much for coming, and we really appreciate your time. Okay, for questions. Oh.